Okay, welcome to our part 4 with Sarah Collison, where we go through the AT process, and now we're looking at what do we do after AT has been rejected. So not something I have luckily experienced before, but what is the first thing you do when you've heard back that your prescription has been rejected?
I think the first thing you want to do is get in writing why. So a lot of times, clients will just call and say, oh, it's been rejected, or the NDIS have said no, but they haven't actually given the client any indication as to what the reasons for that were. So the NDIS have to provide in writing the reasons for why something has not met the reasonable and necessary criteria. So that's what you want to get your hands on. And so it's about encouraging the client or their support coordinator to contact the agency and actually request that decision in writing. Because once you have it in writing, you can identify what the problem was. So it might be that they see it as a duplication of support. Perhaps someone else already has a similar piece of AT and the NDIS doesn't really understand that there's a difference. So you see that often in the case of wheelchairs. So someone, for example, might have a power wheelchair and you're asking for a manual wheelchair to have as kind of backup. And often the NDIS will decline that as a duplicate of support because they're like, you've already got a wheelchair, you don't need a second one. And so it's about understanding, okay, well, what's the specific reason? How do we then provide direct evidence as to why that second wheelchair is needed? Is it for emergency backup, for when the power chair is needing repaired? Is there a certain location they can't access because of the power chair or whatever it might be? But that then allows you to prepare that additional information and evidence to give to the NDIS. So I once had one that was a really interesting one, which was for a pool hoist for a client's home, where the NDIS said no to the pool hoist. So we said, okay, well, tell us the reasons why. And it was really interesting. So they actually had no issue with the hoist itself in terms of the hoist purpose of transferring someone in and out of the pool, but they were not convinced that the person was actually safe to be in the pool in the first place.
Okay.
And so their view was transferring is one aspect of going for a swim in the pool, and they need to be satisfied that in providing funding for the hoist that they're not actually putting someone into a situation where they could be unsafe, because that's one of the rules, that they can't fund something that might be unsafe for a person. And so they were saying we need more evidence that the person can actually engage in all of the tasks that are associated with going for a swim and not just the transfer. So they basically wanted information on accessing the pool itself, getting changed, getting undressed, getting into the swimmers, getting to the hoist, then the transfer. But once in the pool, what if they asphyxiated on the pool water? Like that was one of the questions that they wanted answered. How would the person alert to a support staff or a family member if something was happening and they were having a medical event? How would they then get out of the pool? So we basically then had to go through this entire process of justifying every single aspect of the tasks involved with swimming and how the client would be able to do that. And once we provided that information, they were then satisfied and approved the hoist. So now every time we do a pool hoist, we've got that in our template that actually... So all of these things are always a good learning experience, right? Now we have a template that actually has a breakdown of how are they going to do all of those other tasks, what are the possible risks, and how would we manage those risks. And so we've never had a pool hoist application decline since then, because our template now preempts those things that the NDIS are going to ask for. And so that can be one of the really silver linings, if you like, that if NDIS do decline something, one, it's an opportunity that you can then always argue back and provide more evidence, but it will help you for the next application.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's things that you just wouldn't have thought of that they would need to know, but obviously they do need to know in terms of satisfying that checklist that they have on their end about the reasonable and necessary criteria and things being safe for participants. So it's really important that we get in writing exactly what the issues are, because it allows you then to provide that additional evidence or information that's being requested. We had a situation with a client once who wanted one of those Jenny wheelchairs. They're like the Segway style chairs.
Oh, okay.
So, where you sit in it, it's really controlled by your kind of trunk movements. Now, this client had a diagnosis of MS. So rightly so, the NDIS was like, well, how are we going to guarantee that long-term he's going to be able to continue to use this? And so we had to provide evidence around things like regular physio review to determine his trunk strength and control. Obviously making sure he was fully trained, that we had protocols set up in terms of safety and all of those types of things. But we also had to speak to the client about, well, the NDIS is going to fund this $40,000 Jenny wheelchair for you. If in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, your trunk control reduces as a result of your MS and you're no longer safe to use it, they're probably not going to want to fund another power wheelchair for you.
Yeah.
And the client was like, that's fine, we will fund it ourselves. So that was the other thing that we then put back to the NDIS is actually the client has indicated that they would self-fund the next mobility aid because they do understand that there is a risk in terms of longevity and use of this particular chair because of his condition that he may not be able to use it for the foreseeable future. And that's what helped get that across the line. The other reason the NDIS had rejected it initially, though, is because apparently there'd been an incident maybe 6 months before where someone had kind of run one of these chairs into a fence and injured themselves. And so they were also using the line of, well, we know it's not safe, therefore we can't approve something that's unsafe. And so we also had to really push all the evidence we'd gathered in terms of the trials and all the photographs, and that we would provide the training and the setup and all of those types of things as well. So it's really always very interesting when you get those responses back.
Yeah.
It's really important that OTs understand the process, though, in terms of how that happens alongside the legislation. So if a funded support is declined, then they need to request a review of that decision, which is called a Section 100 request. So you have 100 days to actually, or 3 months, you've got to make that review request. And what happens is that another planner has to pick up the application and determine, did the original planner make the right decision or not? Okay. So they're going to use whatever information the planner originally had and whatever extra information you're providing them as well. So that Section 100 request is actually a form that needs to be filled out. So you would fill that out, get the client to sign it. Any additional evidence you're providing, you would add to that as well. And you'd make sure that they have the original application as well, because a different planner is going to pick it up and review it. And they're deciding if that first decision was correct or not. So they've got to do that based on the original information you had, but also the additional evidence that you provide. And so that's why it's really important to understand what was the basis for that first decision that the planner made, because that's what you're having to address for that second planner to determine, did they make the right decision or not? So that second planner will either uphold that decision or they'll overturn that decision. And so if they overturn it, essentially they're approving what you're requesting. But if they uphold the first decision, they're not changing it. All right. And that means that the only option is to then take it to the ART. And that's where it's an external review. So the ART is going to review that decision and determine whether it was correct or not. And again, they will look at all the evidence that was provided. If they have any additional questions or want further evidence, they'll arrange for that. And they are looking at, was the decision correct or not? And what we know is about 70% of decisions that are looked at by the ART are all overturned in favour of the participant, which means that 70% of the time the NDIS made the wrong decision, which is not a great statistic. But certainly is, I guess, a reflection on the fact that a lot of these issues sit within the agency and not within the prescriber realm. That if you do, unfortunately, have a piece of AT knocked back, it's not necessarily a reflection of doing a bad assessment or a bad report. It's potentially just that the person reading it didn't understand it. And so we always see Section 100 as the best opportunity to try and have that decision overturned in favour of the participant. So really understanding what was the reason for the rejection, so you can address it really clearly with extra evidence, and avoiding people having to go to the ART, because it is a lengthy wait to get something heard at the ART, unfortunately.
Something that just popped into my mind as you were talking about that is that something that the client's plan would allow for? Is that extra time for that extra report?
So it has to. I mean, so basically clients, if they're wanting to then appeal those decisions, they can use that funding for the OT to provide that additional evidence. But that's why I say it's really important that it's targeted. You have to know what evidence you're actually addressing. So if you don't have in writing from the agency what the reason was for the decline, you shouldn't be sitting down and providing another report. You actually need to get your hands on that documentation so that you know exactly what the gap was. What is it they were missing? Sometimes it's something really minor. It's like, the planner in the Sydney office that said, why wasn't it a rant? Like sometimes it's something that you might think was really obvious, but they don't see it in the report. And so you're just having to provide that extra evidence. So you're definitely not wanting to rewrite your AT report or restart the process. Sometimes that's not necessary. It's just providing that extra clarifying informational evidence, like that example with the client with the shower commode and the shower trolley. This is why it was unforeseen. He didn't have this before. So now that he has this AT is no longer suitable and functional. And so helping to kind of bridge that gap in the knowledge they have to help them make that decision.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And if you know what you're having to explain, you're not spending time having to investigate the whole.
Absolutely. And we see that a lot when clients do want to take things to the ART. They'll often say, I need you to write a report for the ART. And I always say, just wait, because the information is probably already in the reports we provided. It's just that the person reading it, the NDIA, didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But the ART will know what to do with it. And you should wait, because the ART, if they've got questions or if they think there's still information needed, they'll then provide a list of targeted questions that they want answered. And then you would answer those questions rather than trying to write a full report. Again, potentially just repeating stuff you've already provided in the original report.
That's great, because it makes the way that you've put it, it doesn't sound as daunting, the AT rejection. I always feared it. I had really good mentors that helped through their learned experiences that I didn't have that, but I was always very scared of it.
Yeah. As I say, if you get a rejection, it's like, okay, it's something has been missed or there's something they can't see in satisfying that reasonable and necessary criteria. And sometimes it's something really minimal and you've just got a planner who's being really mean. Most times it's not something major that you've missed. It's something that you probably haven't even thought of that they were looking for, because it seems so obscure and ridiculous that they would look for it. But that's where it's helpful to then, if you do get that rejection, you can go, okay, well, how do we make sure now we preempt this going forward? So, yeah.
Yeah, like you said, you're learning from it, and you're creating templates and that's helping people that you're mentoring as well. So that's really great. Thank you, Sarah, for your time. I really do appreciate it, and I really appreciate your knowledge in the NDIS and AT space. It's I think will continue to be something that is a bit tricky to navigate, and I think all OTs will agree that we do appreciate your support with that.
No worries. Pleasure.
And thank you. I hope this get a wonderful day.